New York Giants minicamp is over. The second day is in the books, and so is the entire spring session, which means the players and the coaches are now off for the summer until training camp opens on July 22nd. What did we see? What did we like? What didn't we like? What do we still need to find out? We're going to talk to you about it next on the Big Blue Breakdown live. Hi, everybody. I'm Paul Dottino. So glad you could join us again back on our usually scheduled Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time show here on the Big Blue Breakdown. You know, it's really funny as the years go on, and I've been, again, going into my 43rd season of covering this team. You start looking at the calendar and you say, oh, where's that black hole in the calendar? The black hole that's going to mean there's nothing going on. There's nobody at the facility. The coaches aren't there. The players aren't there. It's basically like the Bermuda Triangle of the NFL schedule. And I always look for that every spring because I know it's going to be a rough month. I don't enjoy it when the team is on hiatus. It's just not a whole lot of fun. And it's now here. But here's the good news. I do have at least an hour, maybe an hour and a half, we'll see how it goes, to talk to you guys. And we can rehash everything that we have seen, read, heard about over the last few months as the Giants prepared for the 2025 season. After tonight's show, we will take a break, just like the players and the coaches, and be back with you late July. I'm not sure exactly what day we will start again, as the players are going to be reporting on July 22nd. That will not be the day of the first practice. That's only a reporting day. So I'm not sure yet exactly what day we'll return. But suffice it to say, until then, I'll be kind of down in the dumps. Hopefully the Yankees will start getting some runs and they'll start doing some things with their offense. And they'll make the next month a lot more pleasurable than it could be otherwise. We got a whole bunch of folks right now getting on the chat. Once again, you can do that, or at the bottom of the screen, you'll see it there. It's on the crawl underneath me. You can come in with an audio call or a video call. Hey, since it's the last show of technically the season, right? Because our season extended past the Giants game schedule and ran all the way to June. Why don't we see if we can get some more audio calls and video calls? That would be really cool. I'd love to see that happen on this show tonight. Most of you guys are very shy and are restricted to just typing things out on the computer. All right, here we go. First things first, I'm going to get to a couple of your chats in a second, but I just want to outline what I've got planned for you tonight. I'm going to go through what I saw over the course of the spring drills in a rather unusual way. I'm not just going to talk about certain players. It would be easy just to list a few players and say, well, these guys did great. Look, you know some of the guys who did well because we told you about them. Every week we were coming on the program and we were telling you, Jalen Hyatt's having a great spring. All right, what does that tell you? Not a whole lot because you already know it. So here's what I'm going to do. Tonight on the program, I'm going to give you some categories, some award winners that I drew up. And hopefully you guys, even though you didn't see the practices, maybe you have some thoughts or maybe you have some questions. And then I can respond and maybe fill it out. And who knows? Maybe you'll have a suggestion that might prompt me to change my mind. But these are the categories that I'm going to go through tonight. The player who is most under the radar on offense and on defense. The player who is most intriguing to me after watching spring drills on offense and on defense. The biggest surprise during spring drills on offense and on defense. The most outstanding player on offense and on defense, and then the MVP the most valuable player in my estimation for the whole team. And so those are the categories. If there's another category, perhaps, as I just lost power, or at least part of the power in my office, it does, hold on a second now. Maybe I could try to get this light back on. It's really dark right now. I don't know if does that bother you guys? Does someone want to hit me up on the chat? Can you still see me with the darkness and the light that just went out? Or would you prefer that I try to get that light back on? Scott Young says, Paul, maybe you didn't pay the bill. I don't know. The light down at the other end of the room is still on. All right. James O'Keefe says you're good. All right. So you know what? We're just going to keep the show going. Scott says we can see you just fine. Christine says it looks good. Okay, fine. As long as I'm still here, let's go through the categories, the guys I selected as these award winners, so to speak. And again, if you have some thoughts, fire them off. Maybe you have a different category that I didn't just mention, and you'd like to add one or two and see if I can come up with some names that might fit. We'll go through that in just a second, but first I do want to give you a quick review of today's practice session. Today was a shortened practice. It was about 75 minutes or so, as Coach Daboll was trying to take it easy on the guys. It was called Getaway Day because it was the last day of work before springing the folks for the summer hiatus. So what Daboll decided to do during the course of the practice session, there were only 3 team periods where they went 7-on-7. There was 1 team period of 11-on-11s, and those were only reserved for running plays. Well, as you could probably imagine, there are no highlights in a non-contact running play that's 11-on-11. They just, there's nothing there to, that's all about alignment and assignment. So obviously there's nothing there to highlight. So that turned out to be an empty period in terms of things that we might want to talk about. So here are the 7-on-7s. These were the highlighted plays that were kind of eye openers, that kind of made you say, ooh, cool, nice, right? Whatever. All right. We start off in 7-on-7s. Dalen Cambry catches a touchdown pass from Russell Wilson. It was a rope. A lot of mustard on the spiral. Beautiful throw by Wilson, right on the money. Cambry, no trouble bringing it in, scores the touchdown. Greg Dulcich. Now, Cambry, of course, the undrafted rookie free agent wide receiver. Greg Dulcich, veteran tight end, juggles but holds on and catches a touchdown pass over the middle from Jameis Winston. Those were 2 of the more exciting plays in the first 7-on-7. In the second 7-on-7 of the day, we saw little Jordan Humphrey catch a touchdown pass from Jackson Dart. Nice throw, very accurate, smooth, soft hands by Humphrey, hauled it in for the score. We saw Washington, one of those undrafted rookie free agents, catch a touchdown pass from Dart. Now that one was a back shoulder throw just inside the goal line and inside the right sideline in the end zone. Sweet placement of the ball by Dart. That's the kind of pass that he's capable of making. And again, I do want to tell you, Dart was spectacular from the moment he got here. In the last week, he's had a few misfires, so a little bit of a bumpy road, but nowhere near to the point where I would say he wasn't very good. Absolutely not. Jackson Dart still had a good set of practices over the last week. Just wasn't as fine and as precise on a consistent basis as he was during the first, 3/4 of the off-season program. But nonetheless, okay, so you know what? He showed he's like Mariano Rivera. he can actually be human for a change and occasionally throw a ball that's not beautiful. I get it. Not a big deal. Don't panic. Let's see, what else do we have here? Raheem Lane, an interception off of Jackson Dart, hey, look at that. Let there be light. And we are back. I didn't even have to touch the bulb. Some things never cease to amaze me. Jackson Dart forced the ball to the right side. Lane had really tight coverage. I don't think Dart should have made the throw. I thought that was probably one of the 2 or 3 poor decisions that he made throwing the ball during the entire spring, and Lane picked it off. Then Cambry catches a touchdown pass from Jackson Dart, who fires a laser beam to the rookie wide receiver. That was terrific. And then Tommy DeVito with a frozen rope and a touchdown to Notre Dame wide receiver Bo Collins. You've also heard his name, right, a number of times during the course of training camp. In the third 7-on-7, we had DeVito hitting Cambry again on a nice crossing route in traffic. Really good throw by Tommy DeVito. And then finally, one of those guys who made some flash plays over the course of the camp. And I have to be honest with you, Art Green, who was on this team last year as a deep-seated backup corner, he's made some flash plays during the spring. Tips a ball that was intercepted by one and only Dane Belton. Now, if my calculations are correct, team drills, either 7-on-7s or 11-on-11s, I believe that brings Belton's interception count for the spring to 4. Heck of a spring by Dane Belton, who every time he's in the lineup seems to be around the ball. He's got like magnets in his hands or something. I don't know. But that's pretty wild. All right. So that's really what we got out of today. In terms of some of the items that we would want to tell you about during the course of the media sessions and the press conferences, first of all, we've already put it out for you. You guys read all of my paraphrased live version of my Cliff Notes during the course of the pressers. I'm sure you do at Giants WFAN. Brian Daboll did officially announce the reporting date for training camp is going to be July 22nd. We also found out from the NFL just a short time ago, it was about 4 or 5 hours ago before dinner time, that there are a list of 24 joint training camp practices that are going to be run by NFL teams during the course of summer camp. We knew the Giants and Jets would have a home-and-home series of training camp practices. Well, the NFL has now released the grid. The Giants will be at Florham Park practicing against the Jets on August 12th. That is a Jets-hosted practice, so they're going to be in charge of the directions or the instructions that are necessary to go to that practice. I have no idea how they are going to run the availabilities and the viewing opportunities for that session. The Giants will host the Jets the following day on August the 13th here at East Rutherford at the Quest Diagnostics Training Center. At this point, the Giants have not decided how they are going to allow that practice to occur in terms of will there be public viewing, will there not be public viewing? If there is going to be, how will they decide who gets in and who doesn't? So please keep clicking on your Giants, New York Giants official social media sites. They will have that information, I'm sure, as soon as it's available. I will try to do the same thing for you on my Twitter page at Giants WFAN. No, I do not have TikTok. No, I do not have Instagram. And whatever those other things are out there in the social media world, I do not have them. I have Twitter only. That's what we use to promote our programming, and that's what I will continue to use. So that's about the only place that you're going to see any info from me as far as the practice sessions with the New York Jets. All right, so that was the big kind of newsy stuff that came out of today. Everything else that came out of today had to do with stuff that came from the assistant coaches or the players who spoke. We heard from Jackson Dart, we heard from Tommy DeVito, and we heard from Jermaine Illuminor. We also heard from the Giants position coaches on the defensive side of the ball. Now, before I get to any of those things, let me go over to the chat and just see if I can catch up with some of you folks before you get too bored and you decide to leave the program. I don't want to be answering your questions after you're gone. That wouldn't be fair. Great, though, to see some of our regulars. Mark B., Aiden Fink, Christine. These people are always on the program. There's James O'Keefe. Giant Topic is with us. Let me click on him. Yeah, Giant Topic is with us. Aiden says, what's your estimated date of when pads come on? Aiden, usually they report on the scheduled date. They will have conditioning drills and then basically be in t-shirts and shorts that first practice. Then they'll probably do a couple of days of walkthroughs. My guess as it stands now, and I did ask a few people around the building today when I was down there, and nobody seemed to really know exactly what Brian Daboll has planned. But August the 22nd, July the 22nd is the reporting date. I don't think you'll see a full day with pads until at least 4 or 5 days in, to be honest. I just don't think that's going to happen. So, again, I'll try to let you know when that information becomes available. The Giants' offices will be closed tomorrow, by the way. It is Juneteenth, and a lot of places around the country are not going to be open. The Giants will be closed. There'll be no Big Blue Kickoff Live tomorrow during the day. But, of course, the offices will be back again in business on Friday, and I will be on Big Blue Kickoff Live with John Schmelk. And hopefully by then, we will have some information for you regarding the Giants training camp and the potential practices that you might be able to attend. I invite you to stick around for that on Friday afternoon at its regularly scheduled time around lunchtime, 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time, because this is the last show of the Big Blue Breakdown until training camp starts. So you're not going to be able to get that stuff from me here. You can go to my Twitter page, but I'll still be on Big Blue Kickoff Live as part of the rotating hosts as we continue to go through the off season. Scott Young, just so you know, it says here, maybe you didn't pay the bill, but I did, obviously, because the lights are back on. Just like magic. All right. Oh, this is great. James O'Keefe, I love this. James says, all this time I was thinking it was nice of the Giants to let you use the field house for your office. Oh, hey, I like the background. That's why I picked it. And you know, I took this shot myself because I thought as I was doing this program the first few weeks, and I had a football field behind me, and I think I had another shot with goalposts behind me or something. And I said to myself, there's got to be something better that kind of speaks to, you know, getting down and dirty and getting into the X's and O's and breaking down the New York Football Giants, you know, getting inside how they make the sausage. And I said, well, come on. What says that better than going into the field house and seeing if I can maybe get a picture of some of the equipment so that you guys see, where it is that the players are and where I am, quite frankly, when I'm watching these guys going through their drills and train. So that's why I decided to take this shot of the field house. I thought it would work. And when I popped it in here on the screen, I said, you know what? I really do like it. And I've had a lot of people, not you folks, but other people who are friends of mine who have checked out the show but not been in the chat, tell me that they really love it. They didn't necessarily, I know, James, you can tell that stuff is superimposed. One guy actually only watched for a few seconds, and he was fooled. He thought I actually went down to the Quest Diagnostics Training Center and did the show from the field house. He only watched it for a few seconds, and I guess the picture was clear enough, and you couldn't see the outline, the black outline sometimes, when you have the movement and everything else. He really thought for a moment that I was down there in the field house. So your comment does give me a moment to chuckle and smile, and that's always a good thing, because we need more chuckling and smiling and laughing in this world. God knows we certainly do. All right. Let's see here. 53-6 Dexy says then Paul would be the last one out. Or is that S 3 times I Dexy? Dedicated. Well, yes, sir. I certainly am. I love what I do. And that's why we're here twice this week, right? I was telling Patty over at SI, who runs the New York Giants on SI site, I said, Patty, 2-day minicamp wraps the whole thing up. Why don't I do a show each of the 2 nights? Why just restrict it to my regular Wednesday night show? Let's do one on each of the 2 nights, because there's going to be stuff to say from each of the practices, stuff to say from each of the media sessions. Why not? Why not? Let's do it. And she's like, yeah, you want to go for it? Go for it. I said, look, as long as the fans are willing to participate and they want to talk about it, I'll do it. I wound up doing an hour and 15 last night. I thought I was only going to do an hour. Well, no, I went an hour and 45. I'm sorry. Because, we got some pretty good response, again, for a day that I don't normally do the show. Okay, Scott Young. It was discussed last night, but I see Cam Scatterboo signed a contract today. Yes, he did, Scott. The Giants' 4th round pick, the running back out of Arizona State, is signed, sealed, and delivered. He put ink to paper today. And yes, that means every Giants draft choice from the 2025 selection process has a signed contract. The Giants are all buttoned up. There will be no holdouts. There will be nobody missing. They are intact as they get ready to report for camp in July. Now, that should not surprise you, because for the last handful of years, the NFL has basically slotted salaries for all of the draft choices, so there's not that much to negotiate or to hold out over. Of course, the bonus situation, the guaranteed money situation, injury protection situation, incentives. There are a lot of details that agents want to dicker about in these contracts, and that's what gets them a little bit delayed sometimes. I understand. But the bottom line is, for a guy to hold out and actually miss a part of training camp after being drafted in April, that's about as embarrassing and as shameful as it gets. Because with the basic terms already being locked in by a slotting system, what are you really debating? How much of a gap could you possibly have in your negotiations that you can't work that out and get a player in for the first day of training camp? So anyway, that's where it's at. All right, let's see what we have here. Oh, Christine says she likes the background as well. So does James O'Keefe. And, guys, I appreciate that. Thank you. Please, don't hesitate to give me some kind of feedback on anything that you see, hear, or want, because this show is a conduit, again, to you guys. All right, here we go. Mark B. Always good hearing Coach Patterson talk. Been around for years. He certainly has. Brilliant football mind. I second that notion. So underrated. I second that notion. How's your relationship with him? Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. I get along with the whole staff. When you've been around as long as I have, Mark B, you have had an opportunity to deal with all types. Guys who are shy, guys who are defensive, guys who are very open-minded and willing to talk, guys who are willing to teach you some stuff, guys who are just wanting to shoot the breeze with you. I've been through every kind of personality that you can imagine, whether it be coach, player, scout, or front office person, as I go into my 43rd year of doing this. And Coach Patterson is one of those guys who's not only a gentleman, a class act, very respectful, but he's also very willing to teach you. I can basically ask him anything about, football details, X's and O's kinds of stuff. And much as if I was a player, he'd be willing to teach me the concept or the reason behind something if I did not know what it was. I think those are my favorite coaches every year on staff. The folks who are, willing, because look, nobody knows everything. We all learn every single day, every single year. And so, I'll give you a great example. Coach Patterson today was asked about Abdul Carter. Now, he is going to be basically an outside linebacker as far as the Giants are concerned strategically when they sit him down in the room to make the game plans every week. Okay? That's what he's going to be. He's going to be an outside linebacker first. Then for special third down sub packages, and I know you're going to say, well, they run those sub packages 65% of the time. That's not what's going to happen with Carter. The way they're going to prep him, right now he is an outside linebacker first. But for certain third down packages, they are cross-training him, and he is leaving the outside linebackers room, and he is going to the defensive line room, which is where Coach Andre Patterson is. All right. So what did Patterson say today that really, really caught my attention? And this is why I'm so glad you asked me this question, Mark B. I really am. Because it gives you guys some insight into how I do my job and how I can acquire different pieces of knowledge, not necessarily the clickbait or the rumors or the guesses about injuries or fantasy football junk. No, that's cotton candy. I'm talking about the nuts and the bolts of the game. So what did Coach Patterson say? In talking about Abdul Carter, and I'm going to explain this to you as best as I can because I do want you guys to understand it because it will help you appreciate this athlete on a much higher level. Let me go to the paraphrase as I jotted down the notes in talking to Coach Patterson with some of the other media today. This was right after Charlie Bullen, the outside linebackers coach, had talked about Carter. And then it was Coach Patterson. Okay. Couple things. Two things that I want to tell you about. Number one, let's talk about Carter. Okay? He said he's explosive, he's quick, he has sudden movement. Okay, you guys can all see that with your eyes. You don't need to necessarily be a football person to be able to see and marvel at Abdul Carter's athleticism. Okay, fine. But here's what Coach Patterson said. The thing that makes him very special is his natural ability to win at the top of the rush. He said very few guys have it. Some people can take 2 or 3 years to learn it. Now, what did he mean by that? See, the two things that I was always taught about the great pass rushers, besides the technique and the counter moves and the ability to set guys up, from a physical traits perspective, it was always about the get off at the line of scrimmage, and O.C. Umenyiora had the quickest get off at the snap that I've ever seen in my Giants career. From the time that the quarterback calls for the snap and the hike of the football, it seemed like so many times OC was like a lightning bug. Sometimes he was guessing the snap, but most times it was just that his reaction time was like a flash of lightning. Not only was he able to react within a millisecond, but his body movements in terms of him exploding, getting that acceleration off the line, and getting into his pass rush seemed to be instantaneous. O.C. Imanyura was the quickest pass rusher off the line at the snap that I've ever seen. Okay, so that I always thought was such an elite trait that you'd salivate over. Carter has similar quickness to that, but not OC. OC's still the man. Okay, the other thing that I always marveled at, besides the technique, that's the strength, the power, the moves, the counters, the setups, all that other stuff, the other trait was the bendability. Because, see, what happens when a blocker on the edge is trying to stop a pass rusher, what they want to do is to keep them straight, stand them up, stall them, back them up, or drive them around the pocket. So your elite edge rushers have the ability to bend their torso. And it sounds simple, but it's not. They can bend and twist their torso as they're making their move, and even as they're turning that corner to make the pass rush, to turn the corner and get to the quarterback, right? They've got the bendability to avoid the squared up block by the offensive player. If you let the offensive player, the tackle, the tight end, or the running back, square you up, he's got a better chance of protecting his quarterback. But if you've got the bendability and the pliability to work an angle so that they can't square you up on the block, you've got a better chance of getting into the backfield. So Coach Patterson says that what makes Carter very special is that he has a natural instinctive ability. That's the top of the pass rush, right? When you actually turn that corner to close the pocket. It's not necessarily about just his body movements. It's about his instinctive ability to move the right way in the right time to be able to get around the corner. Most pass rushers, when they execute that bend, it's because they programmed how they're going to rush. It's really hard to be able to make that play on the fly. That's instinctive. That's natural. A lot of pass rushers will determine, as they're getting down into their stance, what's the move I'm going to use? I know what I want to use. If the guy does something that surprises me, I've got a counter in mind that I'm going to go to. So they will plan out the move that they're going to use on the rush, and then the counter they're going to use. Carter, according to what Coach Patterson says, when they looked at him, Charlie Bullen scouted him, just like the Giants scouts, and so did Joe Shane, and so did Brian Daboll. Coach Patterson did too. The ability, instinctively and naturally, on the fly, to execute the move that's necessary at the bend to get around without necessarily planning the move. He can improvise because of his natural ability and instincts. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool stuff. So I hope you guys have a little bit more of an appreciation of the kind of stuff that's what I salivate for. I love this kind of stuff. I never played the game. I've made it my business ever since I could remember to learn as much about it as possible. And I've been around some of the greatest NFL people you could imagine, between Bill Parcells and George Young and, Tom Boyster and Ernie Accorsi. And, Jerry Reese taught me a lot. He was a scout before he was a GM. Obviously, Joe Shane now. And I can't even begin to tell you the numerous scouts and coaches. Kevin Gilbride, Bill Belichick, Steve Spagnuolo, John Fox, Sean Payton. These guys have all taken the time during their course of their stays with the Giants to answer my questions, because I wasn't interested in clickbait. I was interested in understanding the game better so that I could know and explain it, hopefully to you guys, and you'd care to listen. And maybe it would make you enjoy the game better. That's how I did the job. That's how I was brought up. That was old school. I know that's not what happens much today, but that's where I think the value is in doing what I do. Now, the other thing that Coach Patterson said was he's so happy that Dexter Lawrence is not just a dominant player, but that Dexter Lawrence has a tremendous work ethic. Now, why was that important for him? Very simple. Because Dexter sets an example for all of the other defensive linemen in the position room. They look at Dexter and they say, this guy is a freak of nature. He's bigger and stronger than everybody and has athleticism that's off the charts. But boy, look how hard he works. Dedicated, intense, devoted, never stops trying to get better each and every week. Well, Coach Dre, as we call him for short, Andre Patterson, we call him Coach Dre, said basically Dexter Lawrence shows the room how to work. When your best guy, and I'm sure any of you who have been involved in athletics, coaching in particular, you know when your best player is also your hardest worker, it makes your job so much easier. Because everybody looks up to that leader and everybody says, well, if he's going to have to work that hard, even if he's got all the talent in the world and, probably doesn't need to be great, but he's doing it, well, then I'm going to do it too. Maybe I can be a fraction of how good he is. Or maybe it's just a responsibility gene that kicks in and says, look, I'm his teammate. If he's going to work that hard, I have to too. Otherwise, I risk being embarrassed. So I thought that was a very interesting comment by Coach Dre as he was, being asked today about some things from some of the writers. And I was like, Dexter Lawrence is a great example. Russell Wilson has done the same thing, not only in the quarterback's room, but also for the whole team. He's gone out of his way. He is so detailed. He is so, what's the word I'm looking for? Almost obsessed with doing everything possible to not only make himself as good as he can be, but to make every other teammate on that roster be as good as possible. He desperately wants to win. Russell Wilson went through a couple of rotten years in Denver. Okay, last year he made the playoffs with Pittsburgh. But you think a guy who's been in the league this long, going on 37 years old, do you think he wants to come to the New York Giants, see a porous offensive line, get his head handed to him as he gets drilled in the pocket or out of the pocket for that matter? You think he really wants that? And then winds up, having a miserable start to the season, a losing season that's going in the toilet, and then who knows what could happen. At that point, maybe they pull him, and then he winds up on the bench. You think Russell Wilson for even 1 second wants any of that stuff to happen? No. He's going to do everything he can, and it's okay in this case to be a survivor about the situation, because Russell Wilson doesn't want that to happen himself, and as a consequence, he knows that he's got to do everything he can to raise the level of his teammates so that they can all prosper. I know I got off on a tangent there with Russell Wilson, but in any case, I got a video call coming in. So let me hit up this video call. You guys, I see a bunch of comments in the chat. We'll get to you in just a bit. Let me go to Chris. Chris, let me throw you in here. How you doing, Chris?
I'm doing great, sir. How you doing?
I'm well. Good to talk to you. Let me get Mark B's comment off here.
Sure.
I don't want people to attribute that to you. There we go. Go ahead, Chris. What's going on?
Hey, first of all, I love what you do, Paulie. You do excellent work. Really
Thank
appreciate. And as someone that loves journalism, I really appreciate the work and what you do for not just the journalism community, but for the sports community. So please keep up the great work, Paulie.
Well, you're very kind. I enjoy it. Trust me.
Oh no, I can tell. I wanted to talk to you about two things really quick, and I love that you are. I don't even want to say hyping up Russell Wilson, because I think a lot of Giants fans should be excited to have Russell Wilson under center for the New York Giants. But I do want to talk about Jermaine Illuminor and Wan'Dale Robinson specifically. Where do you stand with, despite picking up James Hudson in free agency, signing him to that 2-year deal, picking up Marcus Bow from Purdue, where do you stand on possibly extending Jermaine Illuminor? Because you can argue that even if Evan Neal were to take a step forward, which is a big ask, you would want to keep a guy like Jermaine Illuminor around for depth in case something happens with Andrew Thomas, and you can never have enough good offensive linemen on your football team.
All right, there's a two-part answer to this.
Okay.
First part of the answer is Jermaine Illuminor is a quality NFL tackle. Let's just get that out of the way first. When he got here from the Raiders, I don't think a lot of people in New York really knew who he was, or for that matter, understood the kind of ball he brings to the field. He is a New Jersey guy who has a lot of pride in being here with the Giants. He's a very hard worker. He's a very smart player, very mature, sets examples, is not afraid to speak his mind and to be truthful about it, because he's one of those guys who believes that if you don't recognize and acknowledge the truth, you can't get better. So let me put that off to the side so that you understand I value Jermaine Illuminor a lot. Now, when he signed his deal with the Giants, you may or may not remember during the Hard Knocks series, they were trying to get him for another year on the deal.
Yeah, he wanted 2 years.
But well, he got 24 and 25. They were hoping to sign him for 26, I believe. They wanted to get him on a 3-year deal. He only wanted to sign a 2-year deal. Now, he's 31 years old, which for an offensive lineman is still in his prime. I know what they say, right? It's only 3.5 years average length of player in the NFL. You and I both know offensive linemen can play 10 to 12 years.
It varies. Yeah, it varies per position. Mm-hmm.
So I think Illuminor was hoping to raise his profile by coming to the Giants, playing well, and potentially enhancing his overall value. And there's nothing wrong with that because he was betting on himself.
Yeah.
So here's the problem. As you look at it now, Illuminor is going to be a free agent at the end of the season. And I'm going to be frank with you. I don't know what his ask is going to be. But if you said to me right now, do you think he's outplayed his contract? I'd say yes.
I agree with you there, Paul.
He's a good player.
I agree.
So undoubtedly he's going to ask for a raise. Now, what's that ballpark going to be? He hasn't indicated whether or not he wants to talk about it now or he will put a moratorium on conversations till after the year. Some players are like that, you know. They don't want to talk about it during the season. The Giants usually don't like to do that, but they have done it, but not often. I'd like to see him tied up. But under what terms? The Giants got to figure that out. Jermaine Illuminor has to figure out. You know, he bet on himself. It looks like he's won that bet. He still has to play this season. But after what we saw last year, you'd have to say he's worth more in this next contract than what he got this time. So,
absolutely.
Where are those numbers going to meet? I don't know. So my answer to you is yes, I like him in all facets. Yes, if I'm the Giants, I'd want to keep him. But no, I don't have any idea what the two sides see in terms of appropriate value to make that happen.
I can get behind that.
I'm being honest with you.
No, and I can completely get behind that. And I agree with you because if I'm Jermaine, I'm looking at the contract that they just gave James Hudson, which, if you look at it, are fairly comparable to what they gave Jermaine and Luminor. And I'm saying to myself, okay, if I could have a, let's say, above average season for myself this year, whether I stay with the Giants or not, there are teams throughout the league. I mean, offensive linemen, specifically tackles who have versatility to play on the inside, they're valued. They're heavily valued in the NFL. So he's going to get a contract somewhere. I hope it's with the Giants. I would think that having now a quarterback on a rookie contract, having a little bit more cap flexibility, they'd be able to get it done. But I wouldn't be shocked either way, to be honest with you. But my second question,
Chris, just to be clear, over the cap, which is what I think most of us use when we look at contract stuff, because I don't have access to the official NFL Players Association contract database. Gotcha. I don't. Okay. Agents have that. Some agents actually hand some of that stuff out to some of the writers who will kind of scratch their back for them. I don't get involved in that. I just go to over the cap because I think they do a really excellent job. They're very reputable. They're saying that the 2-year deal Illuminor signed was for $14 million, and the 2-year deal that James Hutchins just signed was for $11.5 million, approximately. Yep. So it's somewhat in the ballpark, but Hudson was signed to be a backup tackle. Illuminor was signed to be a starting player. You're right. So, and you're right. As time goes by, you know, the prices are always going to increase a bit. So I don't know what he's going to ask for. But in reference to your question, yeah, if I were the Giants, I would try to get something done. And I appreciate the fact that they drafted Bo this year and they're going to try him at tackle first. I appreciate that. But, you know, to be honest, Illuminor's flexibility to play left, right, to play guard, even though he's already told us many times he doesn't like to move around much, he's capable of doing it and will always do it for the good of the team, which is another reason you got to love the guy.
Yeah, he had to do it last year.
Yeah, and Bo, they also think he's got flexibility as well. You know, Look, moving forward, look, I haven't seen James Hudson play. I'm not gonna lie to you. I know he's played with Cleveland, and I've probably seen him, but to tell you that I actually watched him snap by snap and know a lot about what he has done in his NFL career, I'd be lying to you. I'm not gonna smoke you on this. I don't know what James Hudson's going to do once he is in a game for the Giants. I've seen him at camp, but there's no contact.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? So if it were me, I would Thomas is tied up. I would tie up Illuminor, and you have Bo in waiting because he just got drafted. To me, I don't know that that I would let Illuminor go. I would rather keep him over James Hudson.
I agree. And honestly, if you can get him on a 3-year contract or maybe even another 2-year contract, I think the development of a player like Marcus Bo, that's only going to help. You don't have to rush him out there just yet. And if you do have a player like Evan Neal take a step forward, you're talking about in 2 years, okay, instead of we need 2 guards, we just need 1. And you always want to get depth, don't get me wrong, but yeah, I see the value of what Jermaine brought, not just to the Giants on the field, but off of the field. He is a fan favorite. He is a player that, really gravitates towards the fans, especially in a crazy year of what we had last year. So I think, getting a player like that in your locker room, it's crucial, especially when we're talking about establishing a culture, which happens, every single year. I'd love to keep him. And then lastly, before I let you go, Paul, I want to talk to you about Wan'Dale Robinson. I know a lot of people, with him primarily playing in the slot, just see him as this gadget slot wide receiver. I'm not going to argue with people there, but I do want to see him get a little bit more targets downfield. I think
Yeah.
when you look at the production of what he had in college, you look at as well as some of the big plays that he's had throughout the years, having a guy like Russell Wilson who I have some of his numbers here. He targets his slot wide receivers 40% of his passes, averages 70% completion rate when targeting his slot receivers, which is higher than Dak Prescott at 68 and Rams Matthew Stafford at 65. So to me, I think having a guy like Russ, who, when you look at the slot wide receivers he's had to deal with throughout his career, why can't a guy like Wan'Dale Robinson take that step forward? And now that they have a quarterback who can maybe make the throws that Daboll wants his quarterbacks to make and hasn't necessarily had, we would be able to see, players like Wan'Dale targeted downfield more. I mean, I just wanted to see where you stood with that, where your thoughts were. Because I think a lot of people just see him as this gadget wide receiver, which I understand. But I
Yeah.
think he has more to his game than just being a gadget wide receiver.
You've just asked another question that requires multiple levels of answers.
I'm sorry, Paul. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. No, don't be sorry. Look, I'm one who loves to peel back the layers of the onion. I talk about it
Me
on Big
too.
Blue Kickoff Live all the time. That's what I do. I pull back the layers of the onion. When you look at Wan'Dale Robinson, there's no question, because of his versatility, his ability to work out of the slot as a receiver, but also potentially be a gadget type player, you could understand why people like that and they gravitate toward that. In some ways, and please, folks, don't go nuts. He's got some of that Deebo Samuel stuff in him. He does.
Okay.
His ability to run a wide receiver end around, his ability to run the wide receiver screen, his ability to get off the line out of a bunch formation. You could do some gadget stuff with him. There's no question. You can even have him just take a pitch and run off of a pitch.
Yeah, you could.
He's got the ability to do that stuff. So I get why people say that. But to your point, you're right. He's more than that. Now, here's what I will say. Yes, you are right about Russell Wilson's ability to throw the ball longer, and I think the Giants want to throw the ball more downfield to every one of their guys, not just Wan'Dale Robinson. They want to get Neighbors deeper. They want Theo Johnson to be deeper. They want Slayton to go deeper. They want Hyatt to go deeper. Russell Wilson, one of the reasons he was a good fit for this team was because he brings the deep ball element that they clearly have been missing.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that part of your question is absolutely valid. The other part to your question, though, is a little bit trickier. Because here's the thing. If you're going to run multiple route concepts out of a play, especially if your offensive line is not going to protect the duration of the long pass, if Slayton's going deep, if Hyatt's going deep, if you're going to try to get Theo Johnson down the seam, well, you only have two options then to get that outlet or that safety valve pass. Because see, Theo is such a great athlete. You probably heard of the RAS score, right? The relative athletic score.
Yes, I have.
Theo Johnson is like in the 95 percentile of every tight end who's ever been tested. So they're going to want to get him downfield more. So here's what you're going to do. Your safety valves are either going to be Wan'Dale Robinson or the running back who's coming out of the backfield.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's going to happen. And if there's not enough time, and if the play breaks down, or if the coverage is too perfect for your play, what do you think Russell Wilson's going to do? He's going to look for one of his two safety valves. And chances are they're going to give him an option. One of them is going to be Robinson, and one of them is going to be a running back. So on those kinds of plays, Robinson is going to be running the short route. So, you know what I'm saying? So there's going to be parts to this playbook where he's still going to be the check down, dump down guy. That's just
Absolutely.
the way it is.
Yeah.
Now,
Somebody has
he
to.
also told us, though, Chris, Robinson did, that he believes, based on the playbook that he's gotten so far, he will get more opportunities this year to run not only longer routes as part of some of those chapters, but there are also some chapters in there where he's going to wind up not in the slot, but he's going to be outside. I suspect those will be more bunch formations than him just lining up solo on the boundary.
Yeah, I could absolutely see that.
I hope that fully answers your question.
No, you did. And I really appreciate you answering my questions, Paul. Sorry I took up a lot of your time.
No, it's fine. Look,
Um,
it's only going on 9 o'clock. I'm glad we've gotten an hour in, and it looks like we got over 600 live, and we got a chat that's cooking pretty good. So, we're going to stay for a while. Hopefully, there'll be some other people who want to call.
Definitely. If not, I'll give you a call back.
Chris, thank you for your time.
Absolutely.
Be well.
Thank you for having me, Paul. Thank you.
Take care. Good stuff, and we appreciate Chris for giving us the opportunity to talk about Wan'Dale Robinson, who, by the way, again, real pro, terrific guy, great attitude, always positive, always smiling. But folks, the part that Chris is absolutely right about, and again, it's not that anything he said was wrong, but when you dissect that question, the Giants do have to get the ball downfield more. See, Brian Daboll was very, very much focused on getting a lot of yak yardage out of this offense the last couple of years. Part of the reason was he thought that was the best way, get the ball quickly out of Daniel Jones's hands, right? Knowing that the offensive line was still a work in progress. You don't want him under duress. You don't want him to get sacked. You don't want him to force something. All right, let's just get it out. Let's get the short pass going, and let's try to get a bunch of yak yards. Well, guess what? That just didn't work very well at all, did it? Neighbors, Slayton, Robinson, they weren't getting very many yak yards. Teams knew. They knew. They figured it out very early, and they started pushing up and suffocating the Giants receivers. How do you know that? Here's how you know. You don't need to be a football guy to know this. When you watch Giants plays, if you were to go back to NFL Plus and call up some of the Giants games last year, watch how many times a pass was thrown by any one of the Giants quarterbacks to one of their receivers. Shorter routes, and the defensive backs were all over them. Either they were there at the point of attack when the ball was being caught, or within one step, the defender was on the wide receiver. Defenses were suffocating the Giants' routes. They understood what was going on. They knew the Giants were hamstrung. And when defensive backs and linebackers can suffocate the routes, you're not going to get the yak yardage that you were trying to get. Again, everything is about peeling the layers off of the onion, connecting the strands of the spider web. One thing always leads to another. That's why pro football is the greatest game in the universe, bar none. All right, let's see. Let's go back to some of the chats. I think I'm behind by a half hour on some of these. James O'Keefe said, very first time I thought you were there at the Giants facility too. I do spend so much time there. It seems like I should have a cot. Oh, Aiden says, why would you always have this background at the hotel when you were at the combine? Because I used the phone that time. That is correct. I did use the phone that time to do the show. I thought you guys would want to have a combine show. And actually, that show had an incredible viewing audience. You guys really, really came to the forefront the night that I did the show from the combine in Indianapolis. That show was an absolute smash success. And I was glad to be able to bring it to you. Got the phone to work. We got all the functions going and made it happen. All right. Oh, I finally figured out what this is. This is Sexy Dexy. I finally figured it out. How about that? He says if the football was a little smaller, I would believe it. Well, that's a real football, Sexy Dexy. That's a real football. I placed the football on top of the tackling dummy because I thought that would be an extra added touch to the background. I didn't like the way it looked just sitting there as a tackling dummy. I was like, no. I'm putting a football up there. Now it looks right. Anyway, Scott Young says, Paul, to be honest, I always thought you never went home. I wonder what your wife must have thought you never being home. Oh, I have so many answers that I could give to that, but I think it's probably best that I just keep moving along to the next question. Okay, let's see here. James O'Keefe says, Coach Patterson has a line of players he's developed into quality NFL pros. There's no question about that. Absolutely, 100%. Armand Duda, how you doing? What'd you miss? You're going to have to go back to the archive, Armand. I'm not going to repeat everything we just did for the last hour, but the archive will be up, pretty soon, right after we get done with the show. Go back. There's a bunch of stuff there about the plays that we saw today at camp. We talked about the news of the day, some of the stuff Daboll said. It's all there. It's all there. I promise you. On our YouTube page. All right, let's see. Arbine Duda says winning at the rush consistently is major. James O'Keefe. I can't stand fantasy football either. I want my team to win and the players on my team to do well. I don't give a damn how well other teams' players are doing until they play my team. James, fantasy football is so not real. It warps people's perceptions of who's good and who's not in the league. For example, right? We all know about a third of the teams in the league nowadays, and it's getting to be almost half, have fullbacks. Fullbacks are very important to those head coaches who have decided to employ them because they understand that being able to have a power running game is critical to being a good football team. And those guys, the Juseks and the Picards, the fullbacks in this league are quality players. And they're terrific, should be respected. Well, fantasy football doesn't respect those guys. They don't even know they exist. Fantasy football is all about numbers. Numbers are paper. That's all they are. They're paper. Numbers are paper. You know, I've said so many times, Phillip Rivers was a great fantasy football quarterback. Tony Romo was a great fantasy football quarterback. I suppose you could make the argument that even Dak Prescott is a pretty darn good fantasy football quarterback. Would I ever want any of those guys on my team? No, I think I'd rather have Eli Manning, Ben Roethlisberger, Kurt Warner, guys who actually have won in the postseason and won championships on the real football field, doing things and having the intangibles that it requires to be a champion, as opposed to some stat line that flashes across my computer screen. So, James, you and I are on the same page. Armand Duda says that split second off the shape, actually he means snap, I'm sure, wins the fight more times than strength. The get off at the snap is incredibly valuable. Yes, incredibly valuable. And OC was just a master. A master. Armand Duda says, I agree, James. The worst thing that I can imagine us drafting a Cowboy or Eagle on my fantasy team. Armand says, Paul's been around some of the best minds the game has had. Oh, indeed I have. Hey, I left out Dan Reeves before. Don't want to do that. Okay, let's see. What else do we have here? Now, Armand says, you got that work ethic too, Paul. Yes, I do, Armand. Thank you. It's because I love my work so much. Hard work inspires hard work. Yes, sir. And Armand says, that's what I respect most about Russell Wilson. He has nothing to prove, but still has the desire to play. Indeed. No question about it. Armand says you can never have enough linemen. Okay. Let's see here. Good point, Armand says they don't teach linemen as well as they used to in school, so they aren't as ready as when they get to the NFL nowadays. So now I'm only about, 15 minutes or so in the chat's behind the real time. Let me see if I can still catch up here. Illuminor was signed to play guard. Now his tackle flexibility allows him to get more money, so says Albert 007. Actually, when the Giants signed Illuminor, they knew he had the position flexibility. Remember, they brought over Carmen Brasillo, the offensive line coach, from the Raiders to be their offensive line coach with the Giants. He had Illuminor at right tackle in Las Vegas, and he had Greg Van Roten at right guard in Las Vegas. The Giants wound up with Van Roten at right guard, had Illuminor at right tackle this past season. And those guys were two of the most consistent, in fact, they were the two most consistent Giants offensive linemen through the course of the entire season. So I think the Giants did well with that. Let's see here. We're going to try to skip through some of these as we try to move down here and get to these chats because there are so many. Yes, Mark B. Wandale Robinson spoke highly about Russell Wilson. All smiles, no question about it. Albert 007 talks about the bubble screen, which it's not so much a gadget play anymore, but you know what I mean. It's a little bit of a funky play. And yes, you're absolutely right. That's one of the kinds of things that you could do with Wandale, no doubt. Armand Duda says, Wilson seems to be well-liked in the locker room. Yes. Chris from the Giant Topic says, appreciate you coming on. No question. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Appreciate the phone call and the questions. They were great questions. You know, I hope you guys learned something from those questions and answers because that's what this show's all about. James O'Keefe says, deep ball threat will open up the rest of the field. Yes. All comes down to the O-line blocking it up and giving the quarterback time. Yes, absolutely. No doubt. Armand Duda, it's the worst thing to happen to NFL fans. Fantasy football, I mean. Well, it just means that people don't have a true appreciation for the players who really do the dirty work on the field. Instead, they reserve most of their plaudits and most of their excitement and enthusiasm for guys who strictly put up numbers. That's all it means, Armand. And then it means people like me have to try to explain why certain players are actually really good and valuable to a team, even though they don't put up fantasy football numbers. Armand Duda says it's tragic what's become of fullbacks. Yes, well, they're kind of coming back, Armand. A few years ago, there was only like 4 or 5 in the league. You know, now they're back up to double digits. Mark B says fantasy football is just that, fantasy. You are correct. All right, let's see here. Oh, Queensboro brother is back. Paul, it's been a minute since I was on your show. If you had the opportunity to reside at the diagnostic center, you would pay rent. Hopefully they wouldn't charge by the square footage. A lot of people really think I live there, and I kind of do in a way. Oh, my goodness. Oh, let's see here. Mark B says Brasillo coaching up has upgraded the offensive line. Yes, Carmen Brasillo, the offensive line coach, has been terrific. Also, the free agent signings, yes. Okay, Daybreak Outdoors. This is a new one. I don't think we've heard from you before. Haven't heard much about the Giants running back room this offseason. Any praise for those guys on your mind? Daybreak, here's what I'm going to say. Because these are non-contact drills, it's very what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say useless because that really does sound rather harsh. There's minuscule value in talking about the running backs, the offensive linemen, the defensive linemen, because these non-contact drills, that's what those three positions are all about. The offensive and defensive lines are all about contact and physicality. And that's mostly what running backs are about too. Now, what can you see with the running backs during these spring drills? You can see if they get the alignment and the assignment correct on their blitz pickup. That you can see. And you can see if they are moving with assertiveness and fluidity because they know what they're doing and they're not making mental errors and getting lost. You could see that. The other thing you could see is how well do they run their pass routes and do they catch the ball effectively? Those are the things that you can see from the sideline if you're not a member of the coaching staff and you're not inside the classroom and, again, you're on the sideline. Those are the things you can see. That's not much of a grade to give. And even if you gave a running back a grade of A for those limited things that we just talked about, how much would that A really be worth if he's not carrying the ball, juking defenders and breaking tackles, defenders who are trying to knock him to the ground? That's one of the reasons why I don't, under any circumstances, in fact, football people laugh at media who keep stats on spring practices because it is laughable. There's nothing substantial about it. Especially like defensively. I saw a bunch of people write yesterday, Abdul Carter had 4 sacks during the spring practice. I mentioned this last night on the show. I'm not going to go long into this. But think about it for a second. The offensive line can line up. They can align to the guy that they're supposed to block. They know the assignment. The ball gets snapped. Whoever's supposed to block Abdul Carter stands in front of him and stands there. And that's all he can do. He stands there like a construction cone in the middle of the street. He can't put a move on him. He can't put a block on him. He can't execute a punch with any force. He can't lean on him. He can't do anything. Zippo. So, what is the point in categorizing sacks with a stat? You just assume put a construction cone in front of him. It makes no sense. Abdul Carter himself would tell you, you're giving me 4 sacks. I ran around a guy who can't do anything to me. Thank you. What are we doing? Yet there are some people who insist on doing this. They insist on keeping stats for stuff that absolutely has no value and makes no sense at all. Anyway, Daybreak Outdoors. Interesting. I'm going to get to my my award winners in just a couple seconds here because I want to finish up the chats. And there's going to be a running back in my award winners. I'll explain that when I get there. Okay? I'll explain that when I get there. It's only going to be a few minutes away, so please hang with us. Christine says, who's your pick? Who's your picks you did from spring? Hope I got that right. Well, again, we're going to get to that in just a bit, Christine. Okay? Armand Duda says the good stuff doesn't start till camp. Absolutely. Armand says Scatterboo just signed. Indeed, he did. Okay. Oh, Daybreak Outdoors says, great answer, 10 out of 10, subscribed. Well, thank you. I don't know how many of you folks, and we have so many regulars, I don't know how many of you folks have subscribed to the program. It's free, obviously. And this way, you'll get it whenever it pops up. And that's wonderful because we can't always put it at the same time like we want to during the season. We're on Wednesday at 8 o'clock. We tried to keep that schedule during the off season, but the Giants' media schedule and practice schedule sometimes made it better to come on a Tuesday or to come on a Thursday or when we did the combine. I don't think we did a Wednesday at the combine, but I can't remember. So sometimes it can be a little tough if you're not following me on Twitter at GiantsWFAN. It can be a little tough sometimes when we have to move the program and maybe you can't find it. And I feel bad about that. But it's always going to be here on the YouTube channel. You can always go back and catch it on the archive. But I do try to give you guys some notice on the Twitter page. So thank you, Daybreak Outdoors. I appreciate it. Armand Duna says, so he can participate in practice now. That's obviously about Cam Scatterboo. Yes. Now, he was nursing a tweak. I don't know the specifics of what it was, but he was working on the trainers with on the side anyway during the last couple of weeks, which means he had signed an injury waiver that allowed him to at least get some gear on and come onto the field and work with the trainers for rehab purposes. Now he has signed his contract. Okay, that just makes everything easy because he's all buttoned up and ready to go. In terms of what the tweak was, I'm not sure exactly what it was, but he certainly did not look inhibited in his movements. He seemed to be pretty good. I saw him running, saw him jogging, saw him, doing various movements. I'm sure it was just some type of soreness, and the Giants were being careful. You want Cam Scatterboo to be at 100% when he gets to the regular season, certainly through training camp and then the regular season. Armand says, yes, non-contact is the most useless for the trenches. It's basically practicing stance. It's about alignment and assignment. That's what it's about. Okay? That's what it's about. It's basically a passing camp. Queensboro Brother says, I was watching the other league who just crowned the champion, and the commentator mentioned one of the players was trying out for the Giants. Would you happen to know his name and his status? Queensboro Brother, I do not. The Giants had 4 tryouts in yesterday. Oh, let me see. I have my trusty roster here, as I showed you guys on the show last night. You like this, folks? Can you see this? No, you can't see this. There you can. Look how small that type is. I wear the glasses a lot of times for the computer because I get eye strain on the computer. But, wow, to see this. All right, let's see. Bradford Millard, safety out of TCU, was a tryout at the minicamp. Millard Bradford. Millard Bradford. His first name is Millard. Okay. Carter O'Donnell, a guard out of Alberta, Canada, was also a tryout. Let's see here. Looks like Tevon Wallace, a safety, was a tryout out of Clemson. Okay. And I believe the other tryout, I'm just looking for him here on the sheet. I know he was in, but I don't see him on the sheet. I don't know why. It was Kenny Dyson, who was an edge rusher from Bryant University. Those were the 4 tryouts that came in yesterday. I did not see any of them get signed. So I believe they were tryouts and they did not get to stay. So they will not be, as far as I know, they will not be invited back in July for training camp. Are any of the players I just mentioned part of the UFL? Queensboro Brother, I'm sorry, I do not know that. And again, for those of you who know me, I'll tell you when I don't know something. I'm not going to smoke you. I'm not going to try to gloss it over. I'll tell you, I don't know. If I can go get it, I'll get the information for you. In this case, we don't have any more programs. If I could find it on Twitter, if you guys aren't able to find it, maybe I'll try to post that for you. I mean, to be frank with you, a guy trying out from a UFL team, I don't know that he really is necessarily someone that you need to give a whole lot of time to, unless he does make it to July training camp. Then you certainly want to make sure you give enough of time and attention to everybody who's in training camp. But I don't think any of the tryouts, the 4 tryouts, got signed. I don't think they're coming to training camp. I don't think they made it. All right, let's see here. Oh, wow. Daybreak Outdoors says, I'm a Jets fan. My family is all Giants fans. Got to show the love. Well, Daybreak, whether or not you're a Giants or a Jets fan, a lot of the stuff we talk about here, X's and O's football, is stuff that I hope still helps your enjoyment of the game if you just love the game of pro football. I mean, there are things that I talk about like when I talked about Abdul Carter before, or we talked about the spring practice drills. That's stuff that you don't have to be a fan of a particular team or player to gain some knowledge and enjoyment out of what it is that we're discussing. And I hope you feel that way. And the fact that you said you subscribed and you're a Jets fan, wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you so much. Sean Jackson. Man, it's been a long time. This guy was one of our regulars for quite a while, and he seemed to have disappeared. Good evening, he says. Long time. When can we expect the training camp schedule? I think I know they were getting razor close, and then finally today, Brian Daboll nailed it down that the reporting date for the players is July 22nd. That we know, okay? We know that the Jets-Giants practices are going to be at Florham Park on August 12th and at East Rutherford on August 13th. That's all we know for sure right now. But the fact that Brian Daboll finally got to the reporting date and put that out today means they're probably 99% there. I hope on Friday, by the time Friday's Big Blue Kickoff Live comes around, when I'm back on with John, that we're able to discuss a training camp schedule with you. The Giants' offices will be closed tomorrow for Juneteenth, as many places are. Big Blue Kickoff Live comes back Friday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time, live. I hope we have a training camp schedule to talk about by then. Sean says, 2 out of the last 3 times I went to Giants camp, they ended up making the playoffs that upcoming season. How cool is that, right? Armand Duda, how about this? Armand has got my back, okay? Armand has got my back. If I were a corner in the National Football League, I would want Armand to be my free safety to protect the long ball over the top. Look at how this guy has my back. He says, appreciate your support, Daybreak. Hope Aaron has a good first season for you as head coach for you guys. How about that, huh? We got some crosstown respect being thrown around here in the chat room, and we got Armand Duda protecting me on the backside on that deep route toward the end zone. Great stuff. Armand, thank you so much for covering me over the top. Okay. James O'Keefe says, thumbs up, not working some tonight for some reason, can't like. Don't know. And there's Daybreak and Armand. They're having a nice conversation between themselves and wishing themselves well and having a good season. Armand says, always got your back, Paul, and I do appreciate that. Thank you so much, Armand. All right, so we've gotten through our chats. I finally exhausted the chats after almost an hour and a half. All right? I will go longer. First, though, I'm going to go through my spring camp awards. I don't know how long that's going to take. Probably not too long. But if you guys want to comment on these, or if you want to add some awards or questions, please hit me up. I'll stay with you longer. We've gone almost 90 minutes now. I'll stay with you a little longer if you like. We're over 700 live views tonight. We did almost 900 live views last night. And that was an unusual night for the program. I'm actually surprised we're not having more live views tonight now that minicamp is over and it's our regular night for the show. Last night was an aberration. And yeah, we had more people tuning in last night. And there's no NBA game tonight either. I know the NBA finals can certainly suck some of the life out of an audience. Aiden Fink. Oh, you know what? Aiden has an item here. Paul, you're still going live on WFAN at 10 o'clock tonight with John. No, that was a mistake. There was a miscommunication, and I apologize, Aiden. The WFAN minicamp wrap-up show that's going to be on John and myself, that's going to be live tomorrow night. And this really works out well. And I probably should have mentioned this earlier. That'll be on WFAN and the app, the WFAN app, tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time here in New York, 101.9 FM and 660 AM. Why that works out really well is because the office is closed during the day, and therefore we have no one with the production staff to run Big Blue Kickoff Live. So there's no BBKL tomorrow at 12:30 in the afternoon. So you guys would have to go a day without that show. So tomorrow night at 10 p.m., we've got with our affiliation, remember WFAN is our flagship station for the Giants. Because of our partnership and affiliation with them, they've got some engineering folks who can help us run the program. We'll be on live tomorrow night at 10 p.m. on WFAN radio in New York, and that will be, in effect, your Thursday Big Blue Kickoff Live show, but it'll be tomorrow night instead of tomorrow at lunchtime. So, Aiden, thank you so much for asking that question. Gave me a chance to explain. Mark B says, appreciate you. I appreciate you back for being part of our listening audience. Sean Jackson comes back and says, Paul, since you're in the Giants building, what's the difference in field team-wise when it comes to DJ's leadership in the past and Russell and Jameis' current leadership for the Giants? Here's the thing, Sean. No knock. This is not. You guys know I'm a Daniel Jones guy. I still think he's going to win the job with the Colts, and he's going to win games with the Colts too. He's going to resurrect his career. I believe that. But here's the difference. The Giants, because of the last two seasons that have really gone downhill and basically sunk into the quicksand, I think a new voice, it's better for everybody. It was better for Daniel Jones to get out of here and to start fresh and be in a completely new environment and a different situation, like opening the window with a breath of fresh air. Ditto for the Giants. I believe that. No one in that Giants locker room will say a word. And it's not because they don't want to. It's because they respect Daniel Jones. Everybody knew how hard he worked, how smart he was, how tough he was, what a terrific teammate, and accountability that he always had for himself. Always willing to help everybody. Again, he was a lot like Eli Manning in terms of all of the intangibles. It did not work out. And clearly it had come to pass that he'd be better off elsewhere and the Giants would be better off with a different voice calling the signals. Russell Wilson has impressed me beyond my wildest dreams. I'm being honest with you. Russell Wilson is extremely energetic. He is very, very detail-oriented. He is dedicated and obsessed with trying to win. He is selfless in every way. He's incredibly smart. look, it's none of my business what happened in Pittsburgh. Apparently, the reports out of Pittsburgh were that him and the offensive coordinator never saw eye to eye. And that was part of the reason why there was a separation there. If I were the Steelers, and I know you're going to say, well, look, they wound up with Aaron Rodgers. I don't care if you like Aaron Rodgers or you don't like Aaron Rodgers. That's not the point, because that is the final result of what happened in Pittsburgh. If I were the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I know the fan base was very upset with the swoon at the end of the season, which was not all on Russell Wilson, by the way. So they were against him as well. But from a strictly football perspective, I think it was senseless and foolish for the Steelers to move on from Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson, to me, has been exemplary in every facet of what he has brought to the New York Giants this spring. Every facet. And Jameis Winston is another guy who we understand the performance on the field. He was signed to be a number 2 quarterback, to be a backup quarterback. That's what he is. That's what the performance on the field says he should be. And that's where the Giants have slotted him. What do they really like? The added value, in addition to knowing they've got a veteran as a number 2 who's won some games in the league? The added value are those intangibles. Jameis Winston has very good intangibles as well. Very, very animated, very energetic, very positive, very outgoing, very fun. That quarterback room, I almost don't want to do this, but talking to Jackson Dart and Tommy DeVito today when they were at the podium for their media sessions, those two guys could not say enough about how Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston have not only made the quarterback's room fun, but they've made the atmosphere around the team fun. And everybody is jumping on board, wanting to work as hard as Russell Wilson does, as hard as Winston does, to try to do everything possible to raise the level of all the boats in the water. These two quarterbacks have made it fun to work hard to try to get better on a daily basis. They have made it fun for everybody on that roster to pay attention to details. Now, you're going to say to me, well, aren't they professional? And when you're professional, aren't you always supposed to act professional? Well, that doesn't happen all the time, folks. I'm sorry, for those of you who think it does, it doesn't. For those of you who think it should happen, you're right. But there is an atmosphere, there is an attitude, there is a mentality. This is that magic word that so many people love to use, and I hate it. Culture. We have to change the culture of the team. You hear that so often. Well, why don't you just say what it really is? Don't just blurt out that word. Say what it really means. Say what goes into that. You know what it is? And this is why I talk about this stuff. It's about mentality. It's about desire. It's about selflessness. It's about dedication. It's about passion for the game. It's about having grit and working through the tough times. Those are all the things, all of the ingredients, the oregano, the salt, the pepper, the onion powder, the garlic, whatever it is that you're putting in the sauce, right? The sauce is the culture. Well, to me, when people just say the culture, it means they don't know what's in the sauce. They're just using that blanket statement because it sounds nice. And people like to throw around fancy nomenclature because it makes them sound smart. No, talk about the ingredients. Tell me about the ingredients that make the environment better, that make the environment conducive to players performing at their best so that the team can win. I'm sorry, folks. I shouldn't get on my soapbox, but, there are so many people who just like to throw words around and they truly don't understand the ingredients in the sauce. And if you ask them, they'd have a very hard time explaining it. In fact, they couldn't. Armand Duda says. Anyway, Sean, I hope that explains it. I don't want to get into all the different examples that Dart and DeVito talked about, although Tommy did say that Winston and Russell Wilson often, they go out together with the quarterbacks together as a foursome. They go out to dinner. They go out and they do things. And even though the two older guys have wives and kids and the two younger guys don't, they still do enjoy their time away from the field together. And when it comes to dinner, the two veterans pay. As Tommy DeVito said today, they're well off. They can handle it. I don't know where they're going for dinner, but Tommy is showing the other three quarterbacks all of the better Italian places to go in northern New Jersey so that they get a taste of the mangia, of the marvelous food, manja that we have here in northern New Jersey. Oman Duda says, you're sporting us with multiple shows this week and still willing to go longer tonight. Much appreciated. Well, much appreciated for you guys. If you're not with me, if you're not giving me stuff to talk about, well, then, I could just sign off. But you guys seem to want to stick with me. So, again, we're closing in on 750 live folks tonight. I'd love to see us get up to 1,000. We had a string of many shows earlier this spring where we were doing 1,000, 1,200 live views almost every week for several weeks. And then I think people kind of got a little tired. Some people went on vacation. Some people started to, after the draft, I think some people started to drop off a little bit. But, you guys are my loyalists here, and you keep coming at it, so we're going to do it. I want to get to these awards, but you keep giving me chats. Let's see. What do we have here? James O'Keefe says, after leaving the Giants, I envisioned DJ in a Steelers uniform. Interesting thought, but I don't think the Steelers were ever in on Daniel Jones. All right. Let's see here. Armand Duda says, surrender the me for the we. Yeah, that's part of it. Sure. That's part of it. And Mark B says, Paul is cooking. Armand says, get on that soapbox, Paul. Look, guys, I love the game. You don't cover the game as I have for 4 decades and not have a passion and a love for the core of the game and what makes it what it is. If I didn't, I would have stopped doing this a long time ago. All right. Aiden, Paul, the Giants need you in the locker room to make a pregame speech before every game. That was so inspiring. Oh, you're very kind. You're very kind. No, I don't think they need me in the locker room before a game. All right. Hey, I got to all the chats. So let's go to our awards. Okay? Let's go for our awards. These are my spring awards for the Giants off-season program. My Under the Radar award on offense. And this goes back to my man. Let me make sure I got his name because he asked me about a running back before. Who was it who asked me about a running back? Oh, my goodness. I think it was Daybreak Outdoors. Yes, he did. Our Jets fan, Daybreak Outdoors, asked about running backs. Well, my under the radar award on offense is running back Dante Miller, also known as Turbo. Now, why do I say that? His blazing speed, remember, he's been clocked at 4.28 in the 40. His speed is apparent every time he touches the ball. It doesn't matter if it's a preseason game or if it's practice. Every time Turbo Miller touches the ball, you see those legs go in rapid fire. And he's like the Roadrunner. Beep, beep, boom, puff of smoke. And everybody else is Wile E. Coyote as they just get lost in his dust. I'm excited about Turbo Miller. I love his speed. I love his game-breaking ability because of it. He was on the practice squad last year. The Giants loved his work ethic. They like his talent. But he was raw. So what did they do? They kept him on the practice squad, and then the final game of the season, they elevated him to 53 so he could get himself a regular game check and get credit for being on the 53-man roster. That was an appreciation for what Dante Miller did and all the hard work that he put in during the season on the practice squad. I think he's an under-the-radar guy because I think it's him battling against Eric Gray for the fourth running back spot on the roster. I do think the Giants will keep 4. Now, the fourth guy probably will not get a uniform on game day unless somebody gets hurt. Scatterboo's going to play. Singletary's going to play. Tyrone Tracy's going to play. So I think the fourth running back probably doesn't get a jersey on game day. He's probably inactive. So I think it's Eric Gray against Turbo Miller for the fourth running back spot. Eric Gray was misused on punt returns and in special teams earlier in his career. It did not work out. And even in those games and in the preseason and in camp last summer, he had some good stretches, but then nothing ever seemed to come of it. And he's been around now for 3 years. This is his 3rd year. It's show me time for Eric Gray. And I like Eric Gray. I liked him very much coming out of school. I thought he'd be a terrific mid-round pick. And it just hasn't clicked. So you have to wonder, Turbo's waiting for his chance. He's looked good in the preseason. He has incredible speed that you just can't teach. He has caught the ball well this spring out of the backfield. I think he is an under-the-radar guy and one of last year's practice squad members. In fact, might be, of all the practice squatters on the 2024 team, he might have the best chance of cracking the 53 this year. So my under-the-radar guy on offense is Dante Turbo Miller. On defense, it is a guy who should get a lot more attention than he does. Chauncey Golston, formerly of the Dallas Cowboys, had 5.5 sacks, I believe, last year, knocked down 5 passes at the line of scrimmage. I see him as more of a defensive end than I do as a stand-up edge rusher. He has done both in his career. I see him as a defensive end. I don't think many people talk very much about him. They don't think very much about him. And I look at a guy who was entering his prime. I think it was critical for the Giants to add a versatile, talented piece to that defensive front. And he is just the guy who fits the bill. I think he's an ascending player. He's long. He's athletic. He certainly has a variety of tools. And in my mind, it's a double win for the Giants because not only do they get a player who I believe is entering his prime and has some of his best years ahead of him, but in addition to that, they also took him off the Dallas Cowboys, team in your division. That's always a good thing if you could pull it off. So I think Chauncey Golston does not get a lot of ink and does not get a lot of conversation. But over the last 2 weeks, I want to say he's batted down 4 different passes at the line of scrimmage during spring drills. Now, I know you're going to throw it back at me and say, Paul, you just told us that these spring drills are not really that big of a deal. No, but here's what is a big deal. Just because there's not contact going on and there's not blocking at the line, you still need to show pure athleticism, skills, and a toolbox. If you're going to be a defensive end in a down 3-point stance, get out of it at the snap, okay? Jump up, deflect the pass, time it correctly, deflect it, and he almost picked it off today. He almost picked it off. That was yesterday. Almost picked it off. Last week, he did the same thing, and he did intercept the ball. That's pure athleticism. That's a skill set. That's a toolbox vision that you can see. That's not about beating your opponent. That's a pure one man having that kind of talent, that kind of skill to be able to physically execute an athletic play. I'm a Chauncey Golston guy. I think you're going to be very happy with Chauncey Golston this year. I say he is my under-the-radar pick on defense. I don't think he's getting nearly enough play coming out of this spring. All right. Isaac Moore says Thomas Fedoni, 7th-round draft pick tight end, is signed. Does that mean he will make the 53? Well, it gives him a better chance, obviously. But no, just because you're signed doesn't automatically guarantee you a roster spot. That, by the way, is going to be one heck of a battle at tight end. How many do they keep? 3 or 4? Probably not 4. If they keep 3, who are the 3? Theo Johnson, Daniel Bellinger for sure. Who's the third guy? Fedoni, guy they just drafted in the 7th round, looks like he's got a lot of ups. Greg Dulcich, former Bronco, high upside when he came out of UCLA a few years ago, had a lot of injuries, but he's definitely a pass-catching threat at tight end. Chris Manhertz, easily the best pure blocker of all of the tight ends on the roster. This is one heck of a battle at tight end. So the answer is no. Fedoni is signed. It does not automatically mean he makes the 53. All right. Next award. The most intriguing player during spring drills for the New York Giants. On offense, offensive lineman Evan Neal. Yeah, I know you guys all want to start throwing tomatoes at the screen. I get it. I know he's been the whipping boy for all of the offensive line woes from the last couple of years. No, I don't think it's fair. I realize he's been up and down. The play's been inconsistent. He has been often injured. I understand all of that. But right now, I am very intrigued. He's working at both guard spots, more so at left guard than right guard, but he is working both guard spots as he makes the conversion. Jermaine Illuminor talked about him today and said he's doing all the right things. He's eager. He's willing to learn. He's smart. And he's got the ability to play the position. It is a difficult transition, but he did play left guard when he was at Alabama. Illuminor is clearly pulling for him. You could tell by that conversation today. And he thinks he's got a real good chance in that competition at left guard. Or, for that matter, he could go back to right guard if Runyon comes in and winds up playing the left side. We also know Runyon has played both left and right guard in the NFL. The way I see it, they've got 6 guards right now fighting for the 2 starting spots and maybe 2 reserve spots. And yes, Evan Neal is right in the middle of that mix. Make no mistake about it. So I am very intrigued by him, because if Evan Neal if he does win one of the starting jobs on that offensive line, if he is one of the best 5 offensive linemen the Giants have when they break camp and is playing week 1 against the Washington Commanders, well, that's one heck of a comeback. Digging himself out of what is perceived to be a big chunk of quicksand to potentially being an opening day starter for the New York Football Giants and making the transition to a new position. So I am most intrigued on offense by Evan Neal's transition and seeing if he can indeed win that competition and wind up supplanting one of the starters. Last year, the 2 primary starters were Greg Van Roten at right guard and John Runyon at left guard. If Neal can supplant one of those 2 guys, boy, does that say a whole lot to all the people who have been down on him and didn't even want him on the team anymore. So yes, I am intrigued. Most intriguing player on defense. Cornerback Tay Banks. Banks has really frustrated the defensive coaches last year with his inconsistent play. And I understand he is a man-to-man press corner, had trouble adjusting to new defensive coordinator Shane Bowen's scheme. And he let it bother him. There's no doubt. He let it bother him. And it did not bring out the best in him. And consequently, it showed up on the field. Now, as you guys know, Coach Henderson is no longer the DB coach. He's gone elsewhere. Giants have brought in a new defensive backs coach, Coach Brooks. And in talking to him today, let me just see something here. Oh, I want to take a look at something here. I want to take a look at something. Give me half a second. Banks, football. All right. Tay Banks has all of the skills you need to be a top flight corner in this league. Make no mistake about it. The toolbox is there. All he needs to do is to make sure he's got his head screwed on straight. He's mature. He's dedicated. He's focused, confident, assertive. He cleans up everything in terms of those intangibles. He's got everything it takes to be a dynamite corner in this league. But now, here's what I want to give you. Okay? Here's what I want to give you. Tay Banks. All right. Banks improved. It wasn't a total loss last year. This is where I wanted to bring this up. Banks last year, for what it's worth, gave up 122 yards of yak compared to 215 yards of yak the year before. It was on 52 completions, 53 completions the year before, so it's virtually the same when you consider the amount of catches. But the point is, for everybody who says he flashed and looked really good as a rookie, and he did, okay? He did look really good as a rookie. But for everybody who says that, they also say, well, he took a big dive in year 2. I don't think that's true. I think he was inconsistent in year 2. If you want to interpret that as taking a dive, well, it is a step back. But it's more inconsistent because there were times he played very, very well last year. And then other times, sometimes in the same game, when he didn't play well. So the yak yardage, virtually the same. That was not much of a dramatic dip. Missed tackles. Sports Radar has him for 3 missed tackles last year. He had 6 missed tackles as a rookie. We know he's physical. We know he's strong. We know he's not afraid to get in the mix. So he improved his missed tackle percentage from 8.6 missed tackles on opportunities to 5.5. So see, it wasn't totally a lost year by Tay Banks. It wasn't. I know the perception is that because of his inconsistencies, because there were times that it didn't seem like he had his head in the game. He's a young player, maturing. This is year 3. Everybody is telling us, coaches and players, they see a different Tay Banks this year. He's asking more questions. He's trying to dig for more knowledge. He's much more interested in what's going on. He's much more assertive. He's trying to understand more conceptually. This is all very good for him. But it's still a show-me situation. Because Cordell Flott finally had a mostly healthy season last year. And he played the best season of his Giants career. So the arrow is on Cordell Flott going up. Cordell Flott is playing better and better every year. And he's now starting to stay on the field more. So what do the Giants want to do? And you heard one of the writers today was going after the fact, Tay Banks is not playing every snap at corner. Sometimes we're seeing Flott in there. They were trying to get Coach Daboll to commit that, Banks is not the starter, or he's fighting for his job. No, I think what's happening here is Tay Banks is penciled in as the starter unless he loses it. And how do you motivate Tay Banks, right? How do you motivate Tay Banks? How do you get Tay Banks to understand that he needs to continue to focus and get better each and every day? How do you do that? Well, you do that by you put Cordell Flott in his shadow and you let him know that there's another young cornerback in the room who is eager to learn, who's eager to get better, and has proven that he can get better over the first few years of his career. You put that in Tay Banks' shadow, and Tay Banks is going to get the message that there's somebody lurking. It's like that starting pitcher who walks 2 guys to lead off the 6th inning and then looks over his shoulder and sees somebody's warming up in the bullpen. Sometimes you don't have to threaten a guy. You just have to give him a little whiff or a little perception that, hey, we have other guys we trust in this locker room too. So don't get too comfortable and don't slack off. We know what you can do. Go out and do it. That's where I'm at. with Tay Banks. Big fan of Tay Banks. Targeted him for the Giants in the first round 2 years ago. Most people didn't think he would be there. Lo and behold, he was. And the Giants got the guy who I wanted them to get all along. So I'm not going to jump off of his bandwagon very quickly. You know that. Sean says, do you miss Xavier McKinney? I like Xavier McKinney. He's a very good player, obviously. Look at the contract he got last season, and he became a Pro Bowl selection. But I thought Jason Pinnock was a good player too, and a lot less expensive. And Tyler Nubin, really, really good player. And he's only coming into his second season. No, Tyler Nubin. Now to have Tyler Nubin and Holland, who was top of the safeties in the free agent market this year. The Giants spent big money to get him. Now they got Holland and they got Tyler Nubin, and Dane Belton is still a dynamite number 3. No, I don't miss Xavier McKinney for the price that he would have cost them on the cap to be retained. No. Full sentence, full context, the answer is no. A lot of comments here about the guys I've picked on these awards, but, we're already at 10 o'clock. Look at this. We're 2 hours in. We're almost at 800. I'm still a little surprised, folks. We didn't do 1,000 tonight. But, so here's what I'm going to do. We're 2 hours in. I did not expect to go this long. I really didn't. So here's what I'm going to do, folks. I'm going to go through the rest of our awards, and then we're going to call it a night. Actually, we're going to call it a season, because we won't be back on this particular program until late July. Biggest surprise of the spring drills on offense from Louisiana, undrafted rookie wide receiver Dylan Cambry was a special teams player in college. In fact, let me just make sure. We've talked about him on Big Blue Kickoff. If you haven't heard us talk about him, folks, this is a remarkable situation. Okay? He was at Louisiana, and let me call this up. You're going to be blown away by this. Last year caught 5 passes for 46 yards and had 1 punt return for 8 yards. Yeah. That's what he had. For his career, 10 catches, 123 yards, and no touchdowns. 2 punt returns for 23 yards. There is nothing about his college resume that says this guy is going to shine in an NFL camp. Nothing. Over the last 2 weeks in particular, he's had a good spring all along. But the last week and a half, let's say, he has been terrific. Catching everything thrown his way in every shape and form imaginable to grab the football. He's extremely energetic. You could see how assertive he is and how confident he is. I'm just like, wow. From somebody who seriously came out of nowhere, Dylan Cambry is that guy. On defense, linebacker Trace Ford, outside linebacker from Oklahoma. Okay? Again, undrafted rookie free agent. And let me give you numbers on Trace Ford. Okay. Trace Ford from Oklahoma State and then Oklahoma. 5 years in college. 58 games played. 10 sacks for his college career. Only had 1.5 last year with the Sooners in 13 games played. 2 career interceptions. 5 career forced fumbles. And no career fumble recoveries. This for a guy who played 5 years in big-time college football. 3 years at Oklahoma State and 2 years at Oklahoma. Comes to the Giants as an undrafted rookie free agent. And I will tell you, over the last 2 weeks, he has had some flashes all along, but the last 2 weeks, he has definitely made a mark and shown people with his athleticism that he has something to offer. That doesn't mean that either Cambry or Ford are going to make the 53. I am not saying that. I am saying those two guys are fellas that I did not study any tape on coming into the draft. I never heard of their names during the combine. And when the Giants brought them in, they didn't exactly move the needle for me. They absolutely flashed. Not just once or twice, but on several occasions during the spring practices. So my biggest surprises on offense, it's Cambry. On defense, it's Ford. We're getting down to the nitty-gritty. We're going to finish up here. Most outstanding player on offense throughout the course of the spring. Wide receiver, Jalin Hyatt. Yes, Jalin Hyatt. Folks, he's up to about 190 pounds now. Came into the league at about 165, I think. He's up to about 190. He's put on some strength, some bulk. Doesn't look like he's lost a step, although I haven't timed him, so I don't know. They've got the GPS on these guys at practice, but I don't have access to that information. He has caught probably almost every pass but one thrown to him during the spring. He has several times gotten behind the defense. Every single time Russell Wilson talks to the media, he makes it a point to single out Jalin Hyatt. The other day, he specifically mentioned plays that Jalin Hyatt ran earlier in his career and made for the Giants. Russell Wilson has done his homework on Jalin Hyatt. He knew when the plays happened, what they were, what the route was, who the opponent was. He clearly has done his homework and can't stop talking about him. Well, that's got to mean something. And we all think that Jalin Hyatt is supposed to be a deep threat in this game, right? That's what he's supposed to be. Well, Russell Wilson's one of the best deep ball throwers that this league has seen in the last 30 years. You understand why there should be a connection between Jalin Hyatt and Russell Wilson. If Jalin Hyatt does, in fact, become a Mario Manningham type player for the Giants, right? He doesn't have to be the one or the two. The Giants had Nix. The Giants had Cruz. Manningham was the 3 on that team. Okay? Giants already have 3 good guys now in Robinson and Hyatt and Neighbors. But if Hyatt can be the Manningham type guy, right? The speed guy, the guy who can go deep over the top, and the guy who also can make some big yak yardage because of his blazing speed if he catches a medium range pass. Imagine how much more dangerous the Giants' passing game will become. Not just because he can make plays, but because the rest of the guys in the routes are going to have some more room to roam. Because if Hyatt can gain the respect of opposing secondaries over the first third or first half of the season, it will open things up even more for the Giants' passing game later on, down the stretch. There is still great potential here for Hyatt to be a significant component in the Giants' offense. It is still there. He's running out of time. The Sands are going through the hourglass. It is a show-me season, season number 3 for Jalin Hyatt. I think he's got it in him. I've talked to the coaches personally. Forget what you've read. I've talked to him. I've talked to the coaches. They're on board. They think that Hyatt has it. He hasn't shown it in games, but they think it's there. And they think Russell Wilson may be that golden key that unlocks Hyatt's potential. Hyatt had a terrific spring. It may not mean anything, but it may be the spark that sets this explosive wide receiver on the right track. Most outstanding player on defense. Well, I think most people who have observed the media practices, open media practices, would probably tell you Abdul Carter, because his ridiculous skill set and toolbox is something to behold when you see him in person. As Carl Banks said the other day, he just moves different. But I'm not going there. Because as I said, standing there on the sideline, holding a pad and saying, Abdul Carter had 4 sacks today against an offensive line that can't touch him, that doesn't do much for me. I get the athleticism. It's jaw-dropping. But don't try to justify that pick with 4 sacks, because the 4 sacks don't mean a hill of beans. I'm going to Dane Belton. Dane Belton, I believe I said earlier in the program, 4 interceptions during the course of spring football with the Giants this year. And what do the Giants need a whole lot of on defense? We know they're going to get a ton of sacks. They had a lot last year. We know they need to stop the run better. And you can't really tell much of that because there's no contact in these drills, but we think they've added guys who will help. But what can we determine? A passing game, right? A passing game that is being practiced throughout the spring. What can we learn from that? We can learn about coverage, and we can learn about the ability to take the ball away. Dane Belton, I'm pretty sure, as I went back through my notes, 7 on 7s and 11 on 11s, had 4 interceptions during spring practice this year. This team desperately needs turnovers. Takeaways are incredibly valuable to a team that's trying to get out of the quicksand. So Dane Belton, for what you did this spring, to be that noticeable in taking the ball away, which you've done throughout your career, but as you've had more reps during this spring, you have continued to do so. Dane Belton, you are my most outstanding player on defense for the Giants' spring practices. Now that brings us to my MVP. Well, I don't think you're going to be much surprised by this one. because everybody has been talking about him. Everybody has been saying that he has been invaluable. Remember, that's the word that goes for the V, valuable, to the entire locker room. Quarterback Russell Wilson, without question. And it's not even close. Russell Wilson has been the Giants' MVP for these spring practices. Every trait and facet of his game and his intangibles, I've described them now for weeks, and I've described them here even a couple of times in this show tonight. Russell Wilson, to this point, was the Giants' MVP of the spring. And if you have missed the physical traits that he brings to the Giants, let me just repeat this one more time. The arm has shown no signs of age. I know he's going on 37 years old, but he can still zip the ball and make all the throws, the short tight ropes across the field, the short tight ropes to the sideline, the long bomb downfield, whether it's on a more horizontal line or if it's a rainbow, the very famous Russell Wilson moon ball, he still has it all. The arm has not deteriorated at all. It's all been there. The accuracy, even in these practices, is extremely high. Why is he not the Russell Wilson of 10 years ago? Well, because he's not as fast as he was then. And you know what? There were times last year with Pittsburgh where he got himself into trouble because he tried to scramble around and make a play on the move, thinking that his legs were as fast as they were when he was with the Seattle Seahawks. And that's when he got into trouble sometimes, because he's not as fast as he was 10 years ago. So yes, does he have to be a little smarter when they get to real game action and understand that that quarter of a step or half a step he may have lost as a mobile quarterback? He's going to have to account for that this year to maximize his efficiency. That's true. That's the concession that Russell Wilson has to make at being nearly 37 years old. He must understand that his legs are not as young or as quick as they used to be and will not always get him out of trouble like they used to. That's the concession he's got to make. He still has legs. You can still roll the pocket. You can still get him out there on a rollout. Yes, you can. And he can still throw on the run. But you don't want to see him do that as much as he used to. And you certainly want to lessen the pressure. If he is rolling out, if he does have to make a play on the move, you don't want it to be heavy pressure. It could be some token pressure, but if it's really, really heavy pressure and he's got to kick it into fourth gear, well, he might not have that fourth gear anymore. So it's up to the Giants' offensive line to allow Russell Wilson to be an older quarterback and to not have to rely on the speed and quickness of his legs as he used to. If you look at his numbers in recent years, he has dramatically cut back on his amount of actual rushes too. Okay, in terms of running the ball forward for yardage, he finally learned. Earlier in his career, he was much more reckless running the ball. He doesn't do that as much anymore. He learned. That's my take. Hey, look at this. We got Drew. Hey, thank you for calling, my friend. Let's join me here on the video.
Hey, how's it going?
What's going on, man?
Not much. Loving the words about Russell Wilson there. I am a huge fan of having him on this team this year. You know, I don't think he's, as you mentioned, not quite the quarterback obviously he was in the past. But still throws a hell of a deep ball. Still is an average quarterback in this league. I think at this point in his career, I think it's probably the best way to describe him. And let's be honest, we haven't had an average quarterback in how many years?
Well, you know what's funny? When we had Max Starks on, the Steelers radio analyst, he did the night that Russell Wilson agreed to the deal with the Giants, I had Max Starks on. Starks played, 10 years, 12 years in this league as an offensive lineman. And he does Steelers radio now. And he said, Russell Wilson absolutely has another year of competitive football in him and can make the Giants competitive again. He's got that. He said, I don't know beyond that. It may only be one more year, but he's got another year.
Yeah.
He did say the legs, and the other thing is, as the weather does get colder and nastier, let's face it, you lose a little elasticity, and there is a possibility if we get a really cold, nasty December into January, we have to be wary of that. We're going to have to keep an eye on Wilson and see how does that potentially affect him a tad. But that's a variable that we can't control. Only the weatherman's going to be able to deal with that.
Yep. And yeah, but also I think people are talking about the weapon difference as well. I mean, Steelers were hurting for receivers last year. Pickens had his injuries, obviously. Yep. Then you throw in their neighbors who, not trying to kick the guy on his way out there with DJ there, but let's be honest, having going DJ to Russell Wilson should be a nice upgrade for Malik Neighbors. You get a guy like Wan'Dale Robinson who comes this close to sniffing 100 catches, came and cracked 700 yards.
I know.
Because he's going to get depth of field of 3.8 yards. You can't go ahead and, produce when you're getting the ball basically like a running back. That's basically what happened to him all year long. Then you got Slayton, who obviously had his worst statistical year in his career as a Giant now. But you look at what he was getting. How many open receivers do we see downfield not getting the ball last year on such a consistent basis? It's not even funny. And that, again, is Russell Wilson's biggest thing he does is the deep ball is great with him. That's why he's hyping up Hyatt so much right now, because he knows Hyatt is the fastest player he's probably ever played with his entire career. And he sees the potential there. But the potential is also there with Slayton as well. Like I said, he just hasn't had these weapons.
Darius Slayton over his career has averaged 15 yards a catch.
Yeah.
And I've cited the number many times. He's one of, I believe, only 5 players in the league who have played since he came in, who have put that kind of average together. Slayton is I know he does have some bouts of inconsistency catching the ball. He's had those throughout his career, but for the most part, he has been a reliable, deep catch kind of wide receiver. Mm-hmm. I mean, you don't average 15 yards a catch for your career in this league by accident.
Nope. And people also forget, and I look at, again, like Sterling Shepard has gotten all the love from Giants fans for a lot of years, deservedly so. The man kept trying to fight back from injury after injury. I'm glad to see he's still keeping his career going down in Tampa Bay. But, look at the numbers that have been put up by Darius Slayton for his career. He's only, a couple hundred yards. Let's see, he's a little over 100 yards difference right now for his career compared to what Sterling Shepard did. If he has one more year at 700 yards, which is for what he's done every year minus last year, basically, he's gonna end up being 4,600 yards. That puts him in the top 10 category of our all-time Giants receiving yards. Ironically enough, Ike Hilliard, I can't believe is number 10 on the list right now. But
Slayton, look, he is a good player. He is a pro in terms of his conduct and his work ethic. He worked his way out of the doghouse with Daboll, you remember, a couple of years back. And for that, he wound up getting re-signed. All right? Think about
Twice.
that. A guy who's in the doghouse not only works himself out, helps the Giants get to the playoffs and win a playoff game, but then even though his contract is up, well, actually before that, they redid his contract to help him out because he was after a tweaking of the deal. They gave it to him. Then they bring him back as a free agent last year when most people thought he was not going to return.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of people are prepared to lose him and Ojulari both. Luckily, we'll keep one of the two there. But, yeah, it's...
And by the way, I should also mention to you, he's really a good big brother in the wide receiver room too.
Mm-hmm.
That's the other part to this intangible stuff that we talk about that a lot of people don't see.
Yeah. That's why I was so glad we kept him. I mean, we talked all last year about a lack of leadership in the locker room because we lost a lot of people that were kind of the vocal leaders over the years. The Leonard Williams, the Xavier McKinney, the guys who are more the vocal, not just the do as I do and follow my lead, but the guys who try to force people to follow their lead, so to speak. And Slayton does have that kind of personality there, where he does take people under his wing. You see him at the press, obviously you see him there, you're there, where he's supporting people that had bad games, and he's trying to take some of the heat off of them and stuff like that. Great teammate. I 100%, like I said, I think he's probably the most underrated Giant in the last 15, 20 years easily.
Drew, you know what I really like about him too? And I don't want to gush over him, but I can't help it because I really like the guy a lot. I like him a lot as a pro. But when you have had some of the rough seasons that this team has had, it's very easy for players to get down. It's very easy for players to lose their passion, to lose some of their heart, to lose some of their desire, to start cutting corners because they feel, what the heck, we're not winning anyway, so what's the point? It's easy. I've seen that happen before. Look, I've been doing this a long time. I've seen some really bad teams and covered really bad teams, and I know what that's like. To go into the locker room last year, week after week, with a team that only won 3 games, and for Slayton to stand up in front of his locker after every single game and take the beating from the press that this team was taking because they consistently were falling short of the mark, and in some ways it was very ugly. And he would literally get angry, not at the media for asking the questions about how bad the situation was. He would get angry because he had so much pride and so much heart for the team, for the players in that locker room, and for the Giants logo. It killed him to see this team have to flounder under 12 feet of water. It killed him. And he wasn't afraid to show people how angry he was to lose. That's why when I tried to explain to so many people when the Giants beat the Colts, in that home game last year, a couple of weeks before the season ended, people don't understand. Guys like Brian Burns and Dexter Lawrence and Darius Slayton, those guys needed that win.
And people also forget there wasn't a great quarterback in this draft. I know Ward obviously was the first overall, but it wasn't like he was a can't-miss prospect. If you put him in the prior year, he would not have been a top 3 pick.
No, he wouldn't have been. No, he wouldn't have been. So, every loss was hurting guys like the guys I just mentioned. It was like open blisters. That's how much it hurt those guys.
Oh, yeah.
And I wish that so many fans, I wish I could take you guys into the locker room and understand what a losing locker room feels like compared to what a winning locker room feels like. If you could taste that, the fans out there who doubt it would have a better understanding of what it means to be a competitor.
Yeah, no, 100%. And we always try on our show to pinpoint the difference. There's players that quite frankly just don't have the talent level, but they keep trying. And there's the players that give up, and you got to kind of specify the difference sometimes when you talk players, because
yes,
talent level has been an issue for the Giants at times the last couple of years. Let's be honest and call it what it is.
No doubt.
That doesn't mean, though, that the guys weren't trying. They just aren't great players.
Correct.
And you got to differentiate the fact, because it's still people you're still, but you still talking about people that are working their tail off and trying to do what they can do at that point there. And I feel like sometimes that's missed by people sometimes. That I don't know if it's people that maybe just never played the sport or didn't play team sports as a whole at that point and don't get that. I mean, like, I'll tell you point blank, when I played in high school and I was horrible. Like, I was starting left bench. I was absolutely horrendous. But that didn't mean I didn't keep trying. That didn't mean I didn't work my tail off trying to get good.
Sure.
So it's like, there's a difference there. And I think that's what we've been dealing with a lot of, is, to be very frank, is I think it's a talent level issue we've had. I think some of it also we've had issues with coaching as well. You saw the difference in that line the first couple weeks last year when Brasilla was able to get his hands on this very similar squad to the most part, talent-wise at least. Obviously some players moved, but it wasn't like we gave some, massive free agents at that point. Didn't get all pros in that line all of a sudden. And the different coaching style of Brasilla, was compared to Bobby Johnson, was I thought was a nice change. Because you keep seeing guys that are Giants that move on, like a Will Hernandez kind of guy that moves on and goes in the team, and all of a sudden it's much better. And it's definitely frustrating as a fan. But again, they are trying. I think we do got to do the difference there. They keep moving things around. They do keep trying to maneuver pieces right now. And for once, I think I'm going into the season optimistic, which is just so weird for me. It's not even funny. And I try to explain to people too, because everybody brings up the schedule, like, oh, the schedule's hard, the schedule's difficult, the schedule's the most difficult in the NFL. I would love, and Paul, maybe you got a stat handy at one point you can bring up here to people, because I've looked for this myself and I couldn't find it. I'm curious who had the supposed toughest schedule last year, because we have no freaking clue how difficult the schedule is until the season actually gets going. Because year to year, the teams aren't good every single year, or you get bad teams that turn around like the Commanders last year. You get good teams like the Bengals that stink all of a sudden.
Cleveland Browns. I had this in my machine.
Yeah, because it's
Browns had the toughest strength of schedule going into last season.
Yeah, and obviously maybe not making my case because you got the second overall pick, but I'm just saying, like, it's you don't know until the season happens. You don't know until the season happens how tough your schedule really is. And one thing I keep on trying to reiterate to fans on a regular basis as well is you have to also remember that the Giants, yes, on paper, they have a very tough schedule. You know who else is a very tough schedule? The Eagles, the Commanders, the Cowboys, that play all very similar teams that we do.
Right.
That's not an excuse this year, guys. Not an excuse, point blank.
No, it's not.
Especially because if the Giants actually handle their business in their division for once and get some wins out of this division, this season is far from a waste. I'm telling guys right now, don't be thinking this is going to be another losing season by the Giants there, because it may be. Don't get me wrong. There's no definites. Things happen. Injuries happen. Players disappoint, don't quite fit the schemes as you were hoping. Things do happen. But this would be a season we go in with some optimism.
Regarding your earlier point about how fans will get very angry and just beat on players on losing teams, I unfortunately believe that is a big offshoot of the gambling and of fantasy football. Because when you hit people in the wallet, right, they're going to be screaming pretty loud, and they don't want to hear any rationale for it. So if a team doesn't do well and you had fantasy football players on that team and they bombed out, they're going to take out their vinegar on that team and those players.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on fantasy.
And if they put some shackles on their home team and their home team got whacked, well, guess what? Not only do they feel bad because they're a fan, but now they feel bad because they got hurt in the wallet. And they don't want to hear any excuses, and they don't want to hear about players who tried, and they don't want to hear about players who are truly professionals and have pride. They don't want to hear that.
Yep.
So, this is part of the fabric of the game that has been altered to some degree. It's not the game itself, but it's the ancillary part of the game. The environment of the game has been altered by fantasy football and legalized gambling.
Yeah. Because now you don't care about your team. You care about your team and this and that. And it's like, okay, well, wow, great. The Giants won, but Tyrone Tracy only got me 5 points or whatever. Like, who cares?
Well, let me ask you a question. I don't know. You're in with me on this, right? You're anti-fantasy football?
So I don't want to say I'm anti. Like, if you want to do that and it helps you enjoy games that you wouldn't necessarily care about otherwise, like, I think it's good for the sport in that sense. So let's say, for example,
and that's fair.
That's fair. You're watching, let's say, the Colts and the Vikings. I'm just throwing a random game out there, and you're only watching because you have Justin Jefferson as your wide receiver on your fantasy team. Like, I get that, and it makes you care about games you wouldn't otherwise care about. It's good for the sport in that regard. But if
Drew, I would tell you this though: if you're first of all, if you're a real fan of a team, then you shouldn't need any fantasy games or gambling to enhance your enjoyment or your rooting interest in your team. If you're a real
Correct. But what
fan
I'm
of your
saying is,
team,
if it's not a team that you're a fan of, you might
right,
have an
right. But
interest
I'm going
now
to go
because
there
of that.
too.
Yeah.
If
Okay.
if you're a fan of the NFL, if you love the game of pro football, look, I do. I can watch any NFL game at any time and appreciate the schemes, the X's and O's, the plays, the athleticism. I'm looking at the officials. I'm looking at the calls that are being made, the defensive adjustments that are being made. I love the game. I don't need fantasy players to help me enjoy a Colts Bengals game.
Mm-hmm.
If that's the Thursday night game, I'm watching that game because I love pro football and I love the NFL. I don't need fantasy to make me tune in. I don't. I'm sorry. And if you love the game, you shouldn't need it.
Yeah, 100%. And the crazy thing is too, like, and obviously, like, we all have our different ways we watch and enjoy football and watch it live. One thing I try to really do is force myself to watch the line specifically, and that's not even involved at all in fantasy football because in the end, I'm a big believer that. And listen, it's cliche, but it's cliche for a reason. You win by winning the trenches, and it's 100% the truth. And that's one thing that I love watching in the game. Is obviously, don't get me wrong, I love watching the big throws downfield and stuff like that. But when the ball first gets snapped, I'm trying to keep an eye specifically at the line, regardless of what's going on behind there, because I want to see what's opening up. And you'll see a lot of that by watching the line specifically. And again, that's totally missed by doing fantasy football. So like I said, I like it because it brings in, I think, the more casual fans. And I think it helps the sport overall. But if you are a fan of a team and you're not rooting for the win as the most important thing, then you're not really a fan of the team. Point blank. I will take last place in a fantasy league, and you know, my team going to the playoffs, the Giants going to the playoffs any day of the week over me getting a championship trophy that somebody bought at the Party City or whatever. I guess that close to Party City, but you know. I don't know where you're getting their fantasy trophies anymore. I guess Amazon, who knows?
Yeah, who knows? Yeah. All right, Drew, I appreciate it. I'm going to try to kick this thing out of here. I have been on now for over 2.5 hours, and I think
there you go.
I think
Beast as always.
I think it's about time to pack this sucker in. So thank you for calling us in tonight.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Take
it easy.
Thank you. All right, great stuff here. So we have had a really great time tonight talking to you folks. I appreciate everybody's participation, whether you were part of the chat, or you were part of an audio call or a video call. Actually, we didn't have any audio calls. You know what? What happened here? There we go. I'm having trouble finding my. You know what? I don't know why that's not centered out, but I don't care right now. I intended to do an hour, maybe an hour and a half tonight, and somehow you folks kept me going. And with well over 800 live views tonight, all the way until past the 2.5 hour mark. I appreciate that. I appreciate all of you people who were with us during the course of the season. We started this thing way back when, during the preseason and training camp of 2024. You stayed with me through a 3-win season. Somehow we talked about game balls and gassers every single day after a game. We talked about previews every single Friday, previewing what the game was going to be and what the key matchups were going to be. We did a live show with you every single Wednesday night. We tried to talk about what was going on at practice. We reviewed the previous game. We previewed the game that was coming up. We have run the gamut here on this program through what was a very disappointing and tumultuous season of New York Giants football. But somehow we got through it. We have gotten through a very exciting period of free agency and the draft, in which I think anybody who knows anything about this game would say the Giants have a vastly improved roster. That doesn't mean they'll win more games. It doesn't mean that, they'll reach for the sky and make the playoffs and be a worst to first team. It doesn't necessarily mean any of that. What it means is that they've got a much better roster. And that's all it means. Because a roster is on paper. A roster is not on the field. A roster is on paper. And that's where the Giants stand right now. A better team on paper. We will know beginning July 22nd when they open training camp and they start to hit and practice for real and then practice again with the Jets, as I mentioned, August 12th at Florham Park and August 13th in East Rutherford. We will then start to get a better idea of what's happening. We will know August 9th when they open the preseason in Buffalo against the Buffalo Bills. We will start to get a much better feeling for exactly what the Giants are going to have this season. But even then, we won't know. And then they'll open the season on September 7th on the road against the Redskins. They'll be on the road in week 2 against Dallas. They'll come home for the Chiefs. They'll come home for the Chargers. And then when they're 4 games into the regular season, the rule of thumb for all football people in this game is that you'll really finally start to know what you are after that first month of the regular season. And then you can really start to chew on that roster and have an understanding of what the realistic expectations might be if everything stays status quo at that time moving forward. Because there are always things that can get thrown into the mix. Injuries, some things off the field, who knows what it could be, that could still sidetrack your freight train. But at least when you get a month into the season, the train should be on the tracks and you should have an idea of what the destination is. Till then, we just have to speculate. We got to deal with a bunch of hypotheticals, which I certainly don't enjoy doing. But we don't have a choice, do we? Folks, that'll do it for this initial season of the Big Blue Breakdown and the Big Blue Breakdown live programs. I really hope that when we come back in July, that's the plan. The plan is to come back in late July. I hope we can do it. That's the plan. I'd like to use the same format. I'd like to use the chats. I'd like to use the audio calls. I'd like to use the video calls. And I hope that maybe in year 2, you guys are a little bit more expressive with the audio and the video calls. I hope you're willing to do that because I really like doing that even more than the chats. But that's for another day. For now, I wish you a very pleasant, healthy, and happy summer, and we will see you at training camp. I'm Paul Dottino for the Big Blue Breakdown Live. So long, everybody. It has been fun.